Please welcome the Regimental Commander, First Class Kurt Carr.
You may be seated. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's distinguished graduate panel. I am First Class Joel Kirkard, the Regimental Commander of the Corps of Cadets. To kick off this evening's event, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the President of the Alumni Association, a member of the class of 1971, Commander Jim Sylvester.
Thank you very much. Following last year's inaugural panel, 2 members of the class of 2007 came to me with suggestions for improving this year's program. The first was to have this before Thanksgiving so it wouldn't interrupt your exam schedule. So I think we've done that. I think we've also answered the request that by having a representative from the 90s, we would have a more representative younger member of the panel. And I think having somebody from the class of 97 who is on maternity leave from her company is about as good as you can do to do that. So Tiffany, thank you for being here. Last year, the Alumni Association gave over $1 million to the Corps of Cadets, and we're very proud of that, and we want to do more. I would like to thank the class of 1974 for their generous support for sponsoring this event tonight, and they're represented by Gary Palmer. And Gary, if you would just stand for a minute to be recognized, I'd appreciate that. We are also honored tonight to have the Coast Guard Academy Board of Trustees with us. They are appointed by the Commandant to validate the mission and vision of the Academy, as well as to provide oversight and serve as advocates to assist the superintendent in an overall instruction, academic and professional success at the Academy. They meet several times a year here at the Academy, and I would ask Admiral Pearson and his members to stand and be recognized at this time. Members? Also with us tonight are the Alumni Association's Board of Directors. They are elected by the alumni membership to establish policy and provide oversight in association affairs. They meet 3 times a year, and Bob Halleck from the class of 1972 is the chairman, and I would ask the alumni board to stand at this time, be recognized. Without any further ado, I'll turn the program over to Don Trone, a 1977 graduate of the Academy and the new director of the Institute for Leadership, who will serve as your moderator for tonight's program. Enjoy the program.
Good evening, Admiral Loy, Admiral Burrow, General Schneider, members of the Board of Trustees, directors of the Coast Guard Alumni Association. And to the Corps of Cadets, good evening. I heard the cat calls earlier, so I'm expecting a little bit more out of you. Over the last 2 months, as I have prepared for this next chapter in my life, 2 words have been circling in my head. Class counts. Of course, the word class is a classic homonym. Same word, same spelling, same pronunciation, can have different meanings. Class counts. From the moment you arrived at the Academy, you were told about the importance of your classmates. Last month was homecoming, and it was the 30th reunion for the great class of 1977. And the consensus among our classmates was It was the best reunion we ever had. Emotions ran high. Good emotions, but emotions ran high. And there were classmates I had not seen or spoken to in over 30 years. Yet, 1 minute into a conversation with these classmates, there was a transposition. We were carried back to Chase Hall, and the 30 years had just vanished. One of the greatest gifts the Academy gives to each one of you is your class. At this institution, class counts. Class. For the past 20 years, I have been working on Wall Street. And I can tell you from firsthand experience on Wall Street, class does not count. Money counts. Class, not so much. It's not that there are not great leaders and individuals on Wall Street, but there are individuals and organizations on Wall Street that would tell you that integrity and honesty is a detriment. You're going to hear a lot about character and leadership development from the Institute for Leadership. One of the characteristics that is shared by all great leaders is class. Great leaders are genuine. They have class. And you're going to get a sense of that this evening when you listen to our distinguished panel. Sir Admiral Loy, Admiral Burho, Dr. Tyler, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come back to the Coast Guard, back to the Academy, back to the Corps, back to an institution where class counts. Thank you. Now to introduce our distinguished panel. Their full bios are in the program you have received, so I'm just going to give a quick introduction. Our first speaker is Vice Admiral Roger Rue, class of 1965, who's currently the Director of Operations, Department of Homeland Security.
How do I look? You look good.
Our second speaker is Admiral Manson Brown, class of 1978, Commander, Maintenance Logistics Command Pacific, and if I understand correctly, you will be assuming the 14th District later on this summer. Now, what's not in his biography is that Admiral Brown and I were in the cadet rock band together. He played the saxophone and I played the drums. Now, I can just imagine what the Corps is thinking at this point. Just the thought of the Admiral and the short, bald man on stage playing in the cadet rock band is enough to curdle your dinner. But I can assure you, when the time came, we could bust a move. Our third speaker, Commander Arlen Reese Matson, class of 1985, who is the Senior Advisor of the Human Capital Management Office within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. When I saw him and met him for the first time this evening, I said, I want to see your business card. There's no way you can get that title on one side of the business card. And our fourth speaker, Ms. Tiffany Jones, class of 1997, who currently heads Semantics. This is a software firm. You're familiar with Norton Antivirus, her company. North American Government Affairs Office in Washington, D.C. Admiral Rue, if you'd lead off.
Good evening, cadets.
good. It's good to be with you. Looking out here, I feel like I'm in a Newcomen lecture. I don't know if they're having those anymore here, but I remember snoozing up there in the rafters when we had those. I hope we will keep you awake tonight. I'm the straight man for Manson Brown, so he'll provide the light part. I thought I would go a little heavy on you tonight, but when I thought about the experiences that I'd had while I was here at the Coast Guard Academy that I might share with you that had a strong influence on me later in life, I considered, of course, courses that I'd attended, classmates. I have one here tonight that I can talk long about that might be entertaining later. Mentors, TAC officers, coaches, and other things. And sure, I can find examples of all of those that might provide good fodder for the discussion tonight, but I'll reserve those for the Q&A period. Given the very short period of time we have for introductory remarks, I'm going to focus on one thing, and it's an important thing. It was the first thing, actually, I learned when I got here, and it is with me still. Who lives here, reveres honor, honors duty. It's the first thing I noticed when I walked in here. Many of you probably did as well. Walking into Chase Hall when you first arrived to report in as cadets, I did that in 1961. I haven't been back to Chase Hall since 1965 when I graduated, actually, and I had to check today to find out if that was still there in Chase Hall. I can't say that I consciously think about those words very often, and I can't say that I live up to them always as well. But they have become a bookend of the personal code around which I have attempted to live my life. Many years after my graduation, we finally got around in the Coast Guard to laying out, or articulating, I should say, our core values. And Admiral Loy, who was a much younger man at that time, I think as Chief of Personnel, we probably call it Human Resources now or some other thing, but it was personnel at the time. He led that effort. And I was very pleased to, I had no part in that, but I was very pleased to see and not surprised that two of those Coast Guard core values came directly from those words inscribed on the deck of Chase Hall. While I'm on this issue of kind of personal code and character, there was one related rule to live by that I thought I would offer for your consideration. Any Tar Heels in the audience? Raise your hand. Who knows the state motto? That's the big question. Isn't that a shame? Well, my high school motto is the same as the motto of the state of North Carolina. Esse quam videre. And I had to struggle through 3 years of Latin in high school to figure out what that meant. But what it means is to be rather than to seem. To be rather than to seem. That has been the other bookend of my personal code. As an 18, 19, or 20-something that you all are here, you are not yet fully formed. You are still becoming who you will be. Your character is still being molded. Your future will be much different than you imagine it now. You are in the process of developing your personal code and your character. That will serve as your anchor to windward. That will serve as your anchor to windward no matter where life takes you or what challenges you face. It's not unusual to be cynical as a cadet. I was a little cynical myself at that time. But I urge you to be open to all the experiences you will have here. This is a wonderful place to help further develop your personal code and your character. If you're like me, you won't appreciate the value of your time here until much later in life. No matter what course you eventually choose for yourself, and no matter how life intrudes on that course, a personal code and a character that builds on a personal code and a character that reveres honor and honors duty, and that is committed to be and to be rather than to seem, will help you to navigate the rocks and shoals that you will no doubt encounter. And years from now, you will look back on your life as a life that was well lived. I will now turn it over to Manson Brown.
This is harder than it looks. Thanks, Admiral Roof. You know, I'm going to do something. I probably shouldn't do it because the soup's going to look at me with the evil eye, but I'm going to do it anyway. First of all previous salutations remain in effect. Admiral Lloyd, good to see you again, sir. You know, I came here from Washington, D.C. back in 1974. And this place was my lifeline. I grew up in inner city Washington, D.C. The one reason I went to the Coast Guard Academy was to get out of D.C. Didn't know how to swim. Didn't know what the Coast Guard was until a Coast Guard officer showed up at my house. But it was my ticket out of D.C. I spent 17 years in D.C. surviving what I thought at the time was a pretty difficult environment. This was a pretty difficult environment. Your tendency when you come here is to simply survive. And I'm here to suggest to you that this is a great opportunity for you, not just to survive, but to learn to thrive like I did. But the one thing I want to do, and the reason I'm standing, is I remember as a cadet I spent a lot of time in Leamy Hall. And for those of you upstairs, your classmates will tell you about it. I had a favorite seat. And let's see who's sitting in my favorite seat. This gentleman right here, stand up. That's you, yes. Now my eyes are failing. Cadet, what's your last name? Cadet Burgess. I got some of the best rest ever in that seat. But tonight, Cadet Burgess, I want you to pay attention because this is some good stuff here. The other thing I want to do is, where's Commander Merle Smith, United States Coast Guard retired? Is he in here with us? Merle, stand up. Now, in my view, Merle is an American hero. Most of you know, if not all of you, that he was the first African American to graduate from this place just a few years ago, 1966. He was also my law instructor and a mentor to me when I came through this place. And we survived, we thrived thanks to you, and I just want to thank you and honor you tonight. Let's see, survive to thrive. Three basic lessons that I took from this place. The first one is about courage. I consider courage to be the fourth core value of the Coast Guard. This place taught me the courage to believe that I could succeed. And courage is an amazing value. If you just stay in the survival mode, you're going to live with fear and anxiety for your entire life. If you exercise a little courage, all of the opportunity that's within you, I think, is going to be released. The second thing I learned was discipline. Came out of a high school in D.C., pretty good GPA. I thought I was something. First semester here kicked me in the tail. And I think most of you have had that experience. It was a humbling experience for me. I had to buckle under. I had to relearn how to learn. Had a lot of help from a lot of great members of the faculty. Ended up getting a fairly decent GPA coming out of this place. The third thing I learned is the basics of what it means to be a member of the Long Blue Line. And one of the reasons I honor Merle Smith is a young officer told me a few years ago that I was the 23rd African American to graduate from this institution. I never really thought of it sort of as a number. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I'm a member of the great class of 78. But the symbology of this place, not just for African Americans, but for all Americans, is striking. And I think we need to celebrate all aspects of that. You, by being here today, are part of the long blue line, whether you graduate from this place or not. Your membership as an Academy classmate is going to follow you through the rest of your life. And so you need to really take the opportunities that this place gives you to be an activist with the long blue line. And that gets back to the surviving to thriving thing. If you're simply surviving, you're going to take the legacy, the experiences, the lessons of the people that came before you, and you're going to consume them for your own sake. If you thrive, you're going to consume them and then pass them on. And so it's really important not only that I took it from somebody like Merle Smith, that I pass it on to somebody like Cadet Burgess. To me, that's the most stark lesson that I took from this place. So my message to you is ask a bunch of questions. I can tell you about Iraq. I can tell you about all the great things I've done in my command. I can tell you about Mr. Trone, but I won't. I'll save those stories for later. I look forward to your questions. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. It's a tough act to follow, so thank you. But I wanted to thank the class of 74 for underwriting this wonderful event. I'm both humbled and honored to be here. I've always had a special spot in my heart for the Academy. As they say, you can take the cadet out of the Academy, you can't take the Academy out of the cadet. And the corollary to that is once a cadet, always a cadet. So some of you have heard of the leadership book, All I Really Need to Know, I Learned in Kindergarten by Robert Fulham. I'm here to tell you that and offer all you really need to know for a successful career you learn here at the Academy. And it's not about the academics. God knows I did not get where I am based on my academic career. I was a 2-0 and go student. But that was not the Academy's fault. That was mine. I had certain expectations of my college career, and I wasn't going to let the Academy stand in the way. What are the statute of limitations, by the way? So, that's not to say I didn't learn anything here. I learned a great deal, and what I want to do is tell you that my learning came a lot from the experience. Well, I experienced a lot based on not just the academics, but the complete package here. I was the class vice president. I was editor-in-chief of the Running Light. I played soccer with Coach Seplick, the elder. I was editor-in-chief of the Howling Gale. And I was a champion flicker ball player, which I was disheartened to hear that it's no longer the vibrant Coach Nichman sport it once was. But I digress briefly. And the point is, each and every one of the activities that I participated in here helped me be the person that I am today. So if I had to boil down the years of experience and learning into 3 traits I received here and applied throughout my career, they would be civility, opportunity, and integrity. Civility. Since I have proven I'm not the smartest guy in the world, I did get a lot done by just saying please and thank you. The service etiquette books that you get may seem like a lot, but following some of the etiquette principles will go a long way in having you stand out in a crowd. One gentleman here that personified civility, as I mentioned him before, Coach Seplick. He's a gentleman's gentleman. Even in the face of bitter defeat, he always did the right thing, very generous with his time, and always thoughtful. So thank you, Coach. I've also tried to emulate some of this in my current position in the Department of Defense, and I have discussed my career and reminisced with classmates and so forth. And their unsolicited comments help to validate what your grandmother should have told you. There is no excuse for bad manners. I might also remind folks that the Coast Guard has core values of honor and respect. Now, for opportunity. This one's a little trickier. I've never before been able to plan my career very well, and I've always relied on the needs of the service for opportunities to find me. That worked out pretty well for me. You can always make opportunities based on your likes and dislikes. I personally pursued intelligence at each of the commands throughout my 19 of the 20 years I was in the Coast Guard. One thing you can do to help your chances is to work hard and do your homework. If you're assigned to be the morale officer or flock orderly, the point is be the best damn morale officer or clock orderly that you can. People will say if they take that job pretty seriously, then just think what they can do as an ops boss or an XO. Last point is integrity. The intelligence business is being a professional secret keeper. And I work in an enterprise that is always looking for the truth. Integrity is huge. This will make or break careers in any line of work. Your reputation has already started. As soon as you walk through the gates during your SWAB summer, your reputation started. Good, bad, or indifferent, it will follow you throughout your career. More importantly, it will precede you throughout your career. People just know when others are lying to them. One lie and it's all over. This is why many businesses and leadership schools have programs on ethics and ethics training. My academic advisor, Earl Pollard, former head of the Leadership and Management Department and no relationship to Harry, told me when I asked him would it be appropriate for me to come back to the academy and teach. Let me preface his statement with the thought that he was a great teacher. He was also one of the few officers that was very well-grounded here at the academy. He came through OCS and had a different perspective than most of the other officers and instructors. So I highly valued his viewpoint and his feedback, and he also personified integrity. So he said, in no uncertain terms, that with my grades, it would probably not be a good idea to come back to the academy. But if you make something of yourself, then you could be a model for those other similar cadets to see if, and to show and be the poster child that there is hope for them as well. So I hope on my participation tonight that others that are academically challenged see that it's worth sticking it out, getting the experiences that are presented to you here, and then of course reaping the awards of your hard work. Thank you.
Good evening. First of all, I'm honored to be such a part of such a distinguished panel. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to come back to the Academy to speak with you tonight. As I was preparing for the panel, I was thinking back to all my cadet days, and I was recalling a lot of great and some not so great memories. But as I was driving across the bridge, I was telling these folks, I started getting the cold sweats. I looked at the academy and I was like, oh my God, am I late for curfew? I'm gonna be in such big trouble, my Lord. And all these feelings just started rushing back. And then I started seeing a lot of familiar faces, some old professors, Admiral Loy, others, and I just, such warm feeling just came over me. It was wonderful. So, as you heard from my bio, I run the DC Government Relations Office for Symantec Corporation. And it's a great job. I really enjoy what I do. I'm married to another Coast Guard Academy graduate, a class of '91 grad, Casey Jones, who works in DC as well as an executive for the Corporate Executive Board. And we have two kids, Madison, who's 2, and Liam, who's 3 months old. So as Don had mentioned, I am on maternity leave right now. So it's my first night away from the newborn. So I'm a little nervous about how my husband's dealing on his own, but that's all right. In order to prepare, Lieutenant Smith, Jamie Smith, gave us some questions that were asked of last year's panel, so I've kind of based it on what the cadets found interesting last year and what you might find interesting. And the first question that he kind of provided us was, what was your biggest challenge or failure as a cadet, and how did it help you learn some important lessons later on in your career? And like Reese and like Admiral Manson Brown, I had a tough first semester. I was a hot shot in high school, did really well, could juggle a lot of things, and then I came to the academy and landed with a 199 my first semester. Was on academic probation. And I recall the Commandant of Cadets at the time, Admiral Rube Olson, walks into my room one night, and I come to attention. He walks up to me, said, "Fourth Class Olson, I heard you're on academic probation." I said, "Yes, Captain." Said, "You know we have the same last name." "Yes, Captain." "You know people think we're related." "Yes, Captain." "Don't let me down." "Yes, Captain." So that was my first experience with the Commandant of Cadets, but it wasn't my last, and all the others were very positive, I want you to know. I worked my tail off as well and ended up with a fairly good GPA moving forward. But I want you to know that if you are struggling or have struggled in the past academically, you can survive and you can do well coming out. Another question that was asked is, what is one aspect of cadet life you underappreciated or hated while you were a cadet, which proved to be an important asset or skill later on in your career? And I had a laundry list of things that I underappreciated as a cadet that I really value now. But the one that kind of stuck out in my mind was not having the summers off, like all my other college buddies. You know, not having to come home and have the whole summer off and party and do this and that. You know, having the 2 weeks or so that we had, coming home and hearing all the wonderful stories from my college buddies about how much fun they were having and how I really just couldn't relate, frankly. But I really value now the experiences that I had over those summers. The Eagle experience, Cat P, going to a small boat station, being on a buoy tender. Those were just amazing experiences because you learn so much about the Coast Guard and its missions. But even more importantly, you learn about the people. You learn about the enlisted and how to treat them. And I'm getting a little emotional now because I had such amazing experiences with some of these people. And they taught me so much. So do not think that those are horrible experiences, because you're going to learn so much from those people and those experiences that you'll carry on later in life. So those were a couple of things that I wanted to just pass on from my cadet days, and just let you know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Whether it's staying in the Coast Guard, whether it's getting out. I had such an amazing officer career. I enjoyed every bit of it. But I'm also enjoying my time now, and would be happy to take any questions that any of you have about my cadet experience, officer experience, or life post-officer. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. We're now going to open up the floor for questions. And as the Corps queues up with their questions, I thought what I would do is take a moment and introduce the Institute for Leadership Staff. Those of you who don't know, we occupy the third floor of the Alumni Center. And when you have the opportunity to swing by and Well, I invite you to swing by and stop by and introduce yourself. So anytime you see the door open, please come on in. The Institute staff, let me start with Admiral Loy, who occupies the Tyler Chair in Leadership. Lieutenant Jamie Smith. Lieutenant Smith has been sharing with me some of the horror stories about this class of 2010. Allison Peabody. And our benefactor, Dr. Jim Tyler. All right, questions? Mike.
Good evening. You spoke a little bit about your summer experiences. I was wondering if there was one experience off campus, away from the academy, that really stood out in your cadet careers and how that impacted your lives after the academy.
I can give you one. 18 days before I graduated, a small group of class of 78 decided we wanted to sort of celebrate our achievement. And we went up to Millington, Connecticut, as I recall, and enrolled in a weekend skydiving course. And, we didn't ask permission. We were firsties. We thought we could pull it off. Day one went, learned all of the procedures. Day two showed up on time to review the procedures. Then we all piled into a Cessna 152, took off. Of course, I was the first guy in line, so when the instructor said, "It's your turn," I had to crawl out on the strut of this airplane at about 2,500 feet and wait for his order once we got to the drop zone. When he commanded jump, I jumped. Now, I must tell you, if anyone has ever done this, the biggest fear, at least back in those days with the technology that was available at the time, was that if you didn't follow the procedure precisely, you were going to get your head taken off by the tail fin. And I kept playing in my mind, particularly as I was on that strut for what seemed like an eternity. But I did jump. I did execute the movement successfully. I will never forget, after going through the procedures and the canopy successfully opening and me not having to deploy my emergency chute. Now, this was a static line jump. I wasn't pulling my own ripcord for a weekend course. But just the serenity and the silence was just amazing to me. And it was at that moment that I really appreciated what we, the class of 78, had done. And then I remembered, oh, by the way, you got to land. And landed successfully. But that really is sort of a metaphor for the academy experience. I mean, it's not jumping out of planes. I've never done that again and never felt compelled to do that again. But it gets to the 2 points I made earlier and a third. You got to have the courage to believe that you can succeed. If you would have told me coming out of high school that I would have ever jumped out of a plane voluntarily, I would have said you were crazy. The second thing is we paid attention to what the instructor said. My classmates and I, the night before the jump, reviewed all of the procedures while many of our classmates were out partying to make sure nobody got killed. Oh, by the way, there were about 40 people in the course that weekend. One hit the side of a barn, one got entangled in power lines. And so that was very instructive for us not to do that again. And the superintendent would want me to say that. So the second thing is what Admiral Loy has hammered into our head as our 21st commandant. Preparation equals performance. That's another lesson of this place. You've got to be disciplined in the application of your time, your talent, and your treasure. And the third thing is that long blue line thing. I would have never done this alone. It was that much more satisfying because I did it with a small group of my classmates, and it was more about the team than about me.
tend to echo that because there is a solidarity about the Corps Cadets. And the stories and the experiences that you have away when you're wearing that uniform and people treat you differently. You look military, you're part of the Coast Guard team, and you share a common bond. And when you get together, it's a great thing. When you're apart, you're thinking about it. So the solidarity goes both ways. And if one of us fails, we all fail. And the importance of that is it is a networked world that we live in, but it's truly the bond that you form here that will transcend anything. Good times, bad times, good jobs, bad jobs. So just keep that in mind. The folks that you may hate now, you will honor them later and say, you know what, we have that same common thing. I hated you 30 years ago, but man, I know that you made it through the way I did, so you will always have that.
I have three things that kind of stick out for me. The first was third class summer, heading on the Eagle to Rouen, France, and we got off the ship for our first liberty. And I remember it was the Bastille celebration, thousands of people everywhere. And I remember getting barraged with thousands of civilians asking for my signature, my autograph. And I thought, what is going on here? I'm no one. But I was in the uniform, I was representing the Coast Guard, and I was a female, and there was only one other ship that had females on it. So that in and of itself was a big deal. So that kind of stuck out for me, and I realized, wow, I need to represent. The second thing was being on the ships, buoy tender out of San Francisco, and a small boat station, Lorraine. You learn that you have to earn respect. Yes, you should get respect from just being an officer when you graduate, but frankly, you need to earn the respect from your enlisted and the other officers on the ship. And I learned that pretty quickly at the small boat station and on the ship, that I also had to listen a lot to these people because they were the ones with the expertise. They knew everything, I knew nothing, and I had to learn a lot and gain their respect over time. And the third thing was I was with the government affairs, I don't know, it was like a club that we had, those who were in the government major. We got to take a trip, I think second and first class got to take a trip to DC and meet with Senate Liaison Office and meet with several different offices, the CIA. We got to go all these different places and speak with Coast Guard representatives who were assigned to these locations. And that's when it kind of hit me that I wanted to go down the direction that I've taken, which was to eventually make it to congressional affairs in the Coast Guard and do government relations, I think, down the road. That was kind of an eye-opener experience for me. And thanks to Judy Youngman for all that she did while I was here.
Any further questions?
Good evening, panel. My name is Sean Arme from the class of 2008. In my almost 3.5 years here, it seems as if we've had an undue share of events that have threatened to derail all that we've done so far. A couple of scandals and some things, as you know, in the news that have put a lot of pressure and scrutiny on us. I'm sure that every class has its event that threatens to derail it, and I'm wondering I'm curious what your event, either inside the academy or outside, was and how you got over that and graduated.
Well, let me just take a shot at that. Those are always going to come your way. It was part of what I was trying to get to in my comments about the rocks and shoals you're going to face, and having the courage, as Manson kind of described it, the personal character to get you through. I'll talk about actually some experiences we're facing right now in the Coast Guard and in the Department of Homeland Security, where I currently work. It's an area where you're going to be working here very shortly. We are in a department in transition and in maturing. It's a brand new department that's been only around for 4 years or so. Almost everywhere you turn, there are things to criticize about what is happening within the Department of Homeland Security. There are things that'll happen that'll cause us to be in the news in a not very favorable way. And the story on that is just to power your way through it. The work that we do is too important. The work that you're going to be embarking upon here very shortly is too important to have it derailed by the kind of scandals that you just alluded to a minute ago. In any institution, no matter how worthy the goals of the institution, no matter how good the institution is, there are going to be people that will do things that are wrong. And that doesn't tarnish the entire institution. And it's up to the rest of us, I think, to be true to the standards that we all hold dear, to make sure we adhere to them to the best of our ability, and to do the job the way we know it needs to be done. That's what you need to do as Coast Guard officers in the future, what you need to do as Coast Guard cadets here at the Academy, what we all need to do as members of the democracy we all are a part of.
And I think that it's important that it's not that there's scandals, because there will always be scandals. It's how you react to it and how do you make it right. And just having a scandal is one thing, but if you work and address it and not let it cripple you, you need to come out of it better than you were before it. So take that opportunity. It has presented itself one way or the other. You need to work it, and you need to come out stronger and better, learning from that scandal.
Since I'm the only one here currently wearing the uniform, I'm going to be very judicious in how I answer this question. This was sort of a perceived scandal, particularly within the Corps at the time. I was part of the first set of cadre to bring women into the academy. I think the year was 1976, if memory serves me correctly. I will never forget all of the preparation and training and sensitivity chats that we had to prepare for this big, momentous day. And when the day came, you know what? No problem. We embraced these young ladies like they were our sisters, and they did just fine. And 4 years later, they graduated, and today, look at you now. So you know what? Things seem earth-shattering when you're going through change, but we as human beings have learned to adapt and overcome. As long as we move forward through these challenges and convert them to opportunities, things are going to be okay.
If there are no further questions, then I'm going to ask Mr. Kirkar to come up and present some special gifts to our panelists.
On behalf of the Corps of Cadets, I would like to thank our panelists for coming and speaking to us this evening. I would like to also thank them for their words of wisdom and insight. Please accept these gifts of appreciation on behalf of the Corps of Cadets.
That means you want us to open them, right? Thank you.
Please rise to the departure of the official party.